Okay, so I'm back again. I don't know if I will add this to the previous commentary, or maybe I'll just make this its own unique recording. But I was in the process of trying to get the previous recording all sorted and have the material arranged and ready to be uploaded. But I just took a quick glance at my social media, which, by the way, is wall to wall, just news about the death. And part of the reason it's getting this kind of wall to wall coverage is the nature of it. Okay, so apparently he was shot in the neck, and the shooting wasn't not like any shooting is a pretty sight anyway, but in the neck. You can imagine. Right as the bullet entered his neck, it just gushed out, and it didn't take much debate to decipher that, his chances were next to none. So I remember initially the headlines that I saw earlier in the day where he had been shot, and I, ignored them and continued what I was working on, because usually when they report shootings, it's not necessarily that there is a casualty. So they'll tell you, okay, 3 dead from X shooting, X dead from Y shooting, you understand? So they just said shot at, and I was like, okay, casually my assumption was, okay, the leg, there will be some form of ICU recovery process or something like that. No, but just for me to take a glance at my social media just some minutes after, and then, okay, there are now reports swarming social media, wall-to-wall coverage, he's dead. So what has brought me back is now there's still wall-to-wall coverage, but on the commentary side, on influencer side, people also in his own line of work, they're trending right now. So both people who opposed him, popular people who opposed him, and popular people who supported his kind of thinking. The hot button question now is, should we, as human beings, is it moral to champion the death of presumably bad people? So in his own case, he wasn't a ubiquitously bad person, in the sense that conservative thinking, I think, is the leading ideology in the United States. If anything, his own frame of mind was the kind of more dominant frame of mind of the average American, I assume. So that said, there is still also a sizable portion of the American population, as well as population of people from different nations worldwide, who oppose the kind of things he supported. So he supported things like, the pro-life and all those right-wing conservative ideas. Okay, so there are many people who are against those kinds of ideas, obviously. So because they know him, and because they know the kind of impedance he was, effectively, not necessarily that he stood in the way directly, but effectively, all right? So the kind of impedance that his, communications, his commentary, the popularity of his work and all of that, the kind of impedance that it might have caused, or they believe for it to have caused progressive outcomes in, be it in the United States or in certain regions or among general societal thinking, they have viewed him as a form of general bad person. Okay, let's just call it bad person. So the question now is, should the death of bad people be celebrated or still mourned? Okay, so I call these videos opinion videos for a reason, right? To give opinions and not just give some form of bystander thing. Here is kind of like my baby stage conclusion, because this isn't a question that I've given much thought to, as opposed to various other topics that can give you even sources and, some reason journeys had to how I got to that mindset and all of that. So this is a generally new question that I feel like, literally just holding this recorder, I feel like it's an interview kind of question. This is the first time I'm answering it, and I'm forming the thought as I'm going. So my idea as it stands as of today being, today is 9/11. Wow. The 11th of September 2025. The time right now is it's in the AM for me, probably still in the PM for some of you still watching this. So the 11th of September 2025, sometime in the AM, all right? My opinion is it really depends, okay? And I know that that's not a yes or no. I believe in nuance, okay? I don't believe in everything is black and white. I don't believe in a Boolean logic. We're not robots. We're human beings with, so many synapses, and our brains work differently and at the same time in very complex manners. Our interactions are layered. There's nuance to being a human being and interacting with other human beings. So it really depends. I imagine, take for example, one is in captivity for years, and then not necessarily that the captor died and they are free, but the captor died, or one of the chief oppressors died. I mean, let's be real, okay? So there are two aspects to this particular situation. But before I get to the two aspects thing, let me conclude my it depends thing. It depends also on the flip side. We could have some pair of friends who are just had a falling out and one of the friends dies. Fair enough, the other friend is still in the heat of the falling out, but I don't think that friend would automatically champion the death of the friend that they just fought with. Obviously, the good memories at that point of the friend would override the bad memories of the friend who is still alive. So it depends on the level of disgust and disdain you have for the departing party. All right? This thing, there isn't one way to react to a death, all right, to the state of being dead now. So this is where that two-part scenario of person, right, this person who was killed very openly comes in. So there is the state of being dead to the state of this person being dead. And this is me addressing the people who identify, I guess, as the progressives. And then people who just had a disdain for the kind of message he passed across. To the state of his being dead, I feel that you are at liberty to feel however you want. To the state of his being dead, to his death specifically. So that is me supposing that he had died of natural causes, somehow at the age of is it 31? Now, to his murder, that's where people are flipping stories around. So I'm seeing a lot of story flipping. And apparently this is a common thing among American political sects. So I'm seeing in the comments, people try to frame it like, oh, people are championing violence. Literally, people who even have whole dissertations on, the negative impacts of loose laws regarding access to firearms. They are now being made to look like they are championing the same thing that they've had entire careers built against. You understand? So I want to acknowledge and discuss the misrepresentation of the jubilation that people are observing. So from what I can decipher right now, people who are supporters of Charlie Kirk's ideology, people who are on his quote-unquote side, that whole side thing is just, as a human being, you should just have logic. But yeah, people who are on his kind of side, the conservative, traditionalist, far-right, whatever you want to call them, are making, it's not a mountain out of a molehill, just misrepresenting joy. You can't feel joy when there is a reduction of impedance to your goal, which is his death, his state of being dead. So two things can be true at once. Again, nuance. You can be grateful that there is no longer, at least in his own capacity, this impedance to your views. You can also condemn open air murder. I don't appreciate this kind of, I call it a tactic, that people are trying to do, in the sense that they are trying to misrepresent the joy that some people are feeling. Now, do I feel like someone should feel joy at any death? Again, like I said, it depends. I will not blame, for example, a captor or a captive jubilating at the death of their captor. You understand? The emotion is strictly between the party who is still alive and the party who is still dead. I have no say over that one. They can celebrate as much as they want because naturally it will give them joy. It will give them joy. Okay? So I don't believe in when it's just a feeling, all right? When it is just a feeling and not ammunition to seek the death of others, to physically enact on your thirst for the death of others, then that's where there's obviously a big issue. Yeah, apparently he wasn't just some guy. Let me just put it that he wasn't just some guy running around doing, his own little thing somewhere. That's, I guess, is the idea he might have wanted to portray, but he wasn't just some guy, really. I'm acknowledging that there's a misrepresentation of what the joy is for. All right, and that is clear. It's not so clear when you see the headlines, when you see comments like, "How can you champion murder?" and think that people are actually championing murder. No one is championing the act of a life being taken away without consent. People are just jubilating over the fact that, well, they acknowledge, yes, a crime has been committed and that itself is a travesty. On the other side, an impedance to progress in their view has come to an end. Two things can exist at once within one situation. So, yeah. You don't need to misconstrue people's intentions when they say things like they are glad. You understand? It can sound bizarre, especially given the timing, and when they just put "I'm glad" full stop without explanation. But to go as far as misconstruing their statements or feeding words into their own statements, I'm saying, apparently there's this whole left-right battle thing going on. I'm seeing things like murderous left, bloodthirsty left, which is just, from where did that come from? Again, some of these people, I guess, on this left are people that have full-blown dissertations against this specific kind of thing. All right? So all those kind of comments, will I say childish is the word? It's just political kind of pandering, really. It's literal politics, kind of. All those making mountains out of molehills kind of things, misrepresenting things to rile people up in your own favor. Yeah, and which is another one of the worst things somebody could use their logic, their brain, and their mouth to do. I understand some people do it for money, some people do it for clicks, some people do it for attention, some people do it for power in terms of, gathering up the electorate and all of that. So I understand why some people do it, be it, intentional or, unintentional. They just actually have those thoughts. That said, it is not good behavior. In fact, let me be a bit emphatic to say intentional misrepresentation of facts is outright despicable, to use a more hyperbolic term. If a bad person dies, you can be happy at the state of death. Obviously, you are not going to champion, like in this case, a murder. That's just it. You can be happy that a burden on your life has gone. All right? You are free to have that joy. All right? No one knows the emotional weight of that, and for somebody to try and belittle the baggage that they have imposed on you in the name of some form of agenda or confusion on their own part is simply unfair. So you can have the relief of a burden being lifted as well as acknowledging a crime. And that's just it. Thank you for listening. I didn't want to, let this simmer, and then it would eventually just float away. And even if I would have maybe typed out some of the things, itemized some of the thought process, it wouldn't have been as fresh as it is, as reactionary as it is, seeing my whole social media just being blocked out by this whole situation. So, yes, that is it. Thank you once again for listening.